Good evening. My name is Stephen DeBenedetto, and I am the chairperson for the Department of Theater here at MSU. And it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to Classes with Cal, Innovations in Teaching in the Arts and Humanities. And it is promises to be an exciting night. I'm new here at the university, and as a part of the theater arts program and a part of the arts in general in the College of Arts and Letters, it's exciting to learn about all of the work that crosses so many programs across the college. We have so many allies working with the arts and through the arts to discover the world and to articulate the world in so many unique and innovative ways. And that's very much what brought me here to MSU. This is an exciting environment where learning doesn't just strictly remain within our own particular departments or silos. It's a collaborative effort that uses the various lenses of our different disciplines and of our different specialties to blend and to think about the world as it challenges us to come up with novel ways to interact and grow society, right? So how can we make this world a place that we are excited to live in? How can we train our students? So it's a pleasure to be a part of this community and to be a part of the community of lifelong learners who are engaged with the college and engaged with the arts and engaged with research in such an active way. Tonight we have a number of speakers. Talks range from our writing, writing, rhetoric, and American cultural studies department, to language learning, to justice. There's a whole range of talks here that promise to shed light on the power of the arts. That's very much what theater does at its heart, and why theater is so preoccupied with creating a public experience for communities. Our department itself here has been trying to engage with the community in many different ways. Trying to take the subjects and preoccupations of society around us and turn them into projects that students can learn through. So that's much of what we've been doing in our season this year as we try to interact in this virtual world and share our experiences in novel ways and keep our students learning. Other ways that our faculty are engaged are with what my colleague Rob Ravznowski is working with, which is this Culture of Care Retirement subcommittee, which is finding ways that we can broaden our interactions with our MSU community and keep our connections going beyond our work life, beyond our life into the community, and find ways that we can partner. So Rob asked for me to reach out and solicit anybody who's willing to work with the subcommittee, who wants to get involved and find more ways for our community to become actively engaged and reach out into the world. So please reach out to Rob Ravznowski if you're interested in getting more active in the retirement subcommittee, in its activities, in its brainstorming. Because we're very much open to ideas, right? We're open to new ideas. We're open to ways to get us involved with each other's work and to make a difference within our community and with our students. So that's exactly what our talks tonight are. We're looking at a variety of aspects of projects that are using the arts to interact with the great challenges we have in our world. And so with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our first talk. There are three sessions. The first talk tonight is by Jonathan Ritz. He's a writing rhetoric and American Cultures Department faculty, and he teaches in the professional and public writing program. And he's also a licensed counselor and currently serves as the CAL's inaugural director of student wellness. And I know this is a position that my colleagues in theater were celebrating when we heard that he was joining us in this capacity. So with no further ado, please welcome Jonathan Witz and his talk, The Science and Art of Wellbeing, Integrating Student Wellness into CAL Courses.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, everybody. Let me bring up my slides here. Okay. So, yes, as Stephen said, I am a faculty member in RAC, but tonight I will be talking about this new role that I've taken on in the college. It's a picture of me in pre-COVID days. My title, my job has kind of two halves to it, the Director of Student Wellness and then Embedded CAPS Counselor. I'm going to talk about both of those. And let me just start with a very kind of micro version of my biography and how I got into this role. So my PhD is in English with specializations in creative writing and composition. I've spent most of my career as a writer and writing teacher focused on personal essay and creative nonfiction. I came to Michigan State in 2007 with my wife, Patty, who's a faculty member in the Linguistics and Languages Department. Most of my time at MSU, I've served as an academic specialist, teaching courses in our professional writing major, now professional and public writing major. Also serving as the undergraduate advisor and internship coordinator for our professional writing majors. It was doing this work and some other things in my life that got me interested in the role that mental health plays in our students' lives and in their success. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go back to school for another master's degree, which I just finished this summer. So as Stephen said, I am now a licensed counselor in Michigan. I have a Master's of Arts degree in counseling. So as I was getting ready to come back to my academic specialist position this fall, I had this idea of trying to create a position that would allow me to keep a foot in both of these areas, that would allow me to do the clinical work of a counselor. And having done my clinical training at MSU's Counseling Center, or CAPS, I knew that world here pretty well after a year. So one foot would remain in the clinical side, and then I'd also have a foot back in the teaching side. Also saw this as a way to try to bridge the silos of student affairs and academic affairs, which tend to be very separate on college campuses. So I'm interested in doing both of those pieces of the job, and I'm also really interested in the way they kind of connect and can talk to each other. So I made a proposal to Chris Long, our dean, and Kara Solano, the associate dean for undergraduate affairs, and they supported me doing a one-year pilot with the hope of going beyond that. And so that's where we are. So as I said, the job has two halves to it. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the first half, the embedded CAPS counselor, and then most of my presentation will be about the director of student wellness piece, because I think that really connects a little more to Cal. So the embedded CAPS counselor is fairly straightforward. I'm a staff therapist at CAPS, but I work exclusively or mostly exclusively with arts and letters students. So I provide walk-in consultation, which is sort of counseling office hours. I also do intake screening, individual counseling, and group counseling with our students. My main goal for this half of my job is to create an access point to mental health care for Cal students that is located in their academic unit. So of course, there's always been kind of one main way that students access mental health care at MSU. They would walk over to Olin when Olin was open. Everything, of course, has been remote this year. But they would go in, they'd fill in some paperwork, they'd go to the waiting room, and they'd wait to be called back for a screening intake appointment. So that model is still there, of course, but CAPS is looking at other ways that we can give students access points or portals to mental health. I'm actually the second embedded counselor who is embedded in an academic unit. There are also embedded counselors in student union and several of the residence halls. So it's really about access and sort of meeting students where they are to get them the help that they need. So that's the first half, the embedded counselor half. So the director of student wellness part is the part that is a little more kind of academic facing. So there's several goals here. The main goal is to try to bring the concept of wellness into the DNA or sort of the bloodstream of what we are trying to deliver to our undergraduate students as part of their experience within the College of Arts and Letters. So I think of wellness as now kind of the third piece of what we're bringing to undergraduate education. The first piece, the main piece, of course, is the academic training that they receive through our majors and minors. That's the reason they come into our college, and of course, that will always be our primary and most important purpose. The second purpose, the thing that we've really, I think, developed and beefed up over the last 10 years is professional and career preparation. So through the Excel network and things like that, really getting students to be workplace ready and prepared for professional life or graduate school as part of their undergraduate education. So I'm thinking of wellness as kind of the third piece, the third thing that we want to try to deliver to our students while they're here. How do we do that? Well, I work with faculty and advisors and administrators to find ways that we can begin to implement this into the curriculum at every possible level. I'm creating my own co-curricular events for our students that are focused on wellness. I'm also trying to make students more aware of all the opportunities around campus and around the community for them to learn more about wellness and to develop this part of their life. So this, of course, raises the question of what is wellness? Wellness, as you probably know, a bit of a buzzword at the moment, a big concept, lots of different ways to define it. So here's how I try to get a handle on it, or how I try to conceptualize it in terms of what I want our students to experience or be connected to. So the three models I'm looking at are behaviors across life domains model of wellness, flourishing model of wellness, and a mindfulness model of wellness. So the first one, probably the most conventional model of wellness, or the one that we would think of first, is based on particular behaviors across these different life dimensions that correlate to well-being or a healthy life. These are behaviors, which means they're observable. So in theory, I could follow any one of you for a week and sort of watch how you behave in each of these domains and observe and make some notes and come up with a general assessment about your state of wellness or well-being in these domains. I think this is a good place to start. It gives us a general sort of sense of what a healthy life looks like. The second model moves from those observable behaviors to more sort of an attitudinal sense of wellness or well-being, someone's own view of their well-being. This is based on an assessment measurement, where students are given these 7 questions on a Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Based on that, you come up with a score that determines your level of flourishing, is the word they use for this instrument. And this starts to bring in some concepts beyond just behaviors that we can associate with flourishing. So purpose and meaning, social relationships. engagement in meaningful activities, contributing to the well-being of others. That's one I think we're especially kind of tuned into in Cal. Being a good person, being optimistic about the future, and feeling competent and respected. Again, I think this gives us a good model to work with for wellness. Interesting kind of side note here, this piece of data it's derived from the Healthy Minds Survey, which is a survey of tens of thousands of college students that's conducted every year, actually by the University of Michigan, that looks at behaviors and attitudes around mental health. And it's kind of interesting if you pull out the majors that would fall into Cal. So here we have humanities, here we have art. I think theater would probably be in this other category, the way they categorize it. But you notice where the lowest categories, our students are at the lowest categories for flourishing on that self-assessment instrument. So, something that kind of jumps out. So the third model of wellness, and the one that really I'm probably the most interested in, is the idea of mindfulness and wellness, or the correlation between cultivated, developed, mindful approaches, habits of mind, techniques, correlation to wellness and mental health. So what is mindfulness? Again, sort of a buzzword that's out there. In general, mindfulness just meaning the relationship that we develop with our own inner life, our own thoughts, feelings, memories, and sensations. A lot of evidence, an already robust body of evidence that's growing about the connection between cultivating mindfulness practice as a way to reduce prevalent forms of mental illness across a wide spectrum of different types of psychopathologies, seeing that these mindfulness techniques sort of can impact these mental illness at kind of a lower level or a process level. And so this becomes a really powerful set of tools and techniques that we can introduce students to. So how do we do that? To give you just a really quick sense of how I approach this theoretically as a mental health clinician, drawing on something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is known by its acronym of ACT. ACT is was developed as a psychotherapy model or treatment modality. It's about 30 years old. It's in the behavioral school of treatment modalities. So if you know of like cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT is kind of the next generation of treatment modalities in that school. And ACT is really trying to help clients, or in this case, students, develop a relationship to their inner experiences that allows them to live a value-based life. So if looking at this thing called the ACT hexaflex, the things in black, written in black, are what we want students to be moving toward. The things in red are what we want them to be moving away, with the main overall goal being what in ACT we call psychological flexibility. So here we have present-mindedness, acceptance, and diffusion. And then, whoops, sorry. On the other side, we have values, behaviors, and self as context. So the interesting thing about ACT, even though it was developed to be used in psychotherapy, it has been applied to a lot of other contexts, particularly educational contexts. So I think it gives us a good framework to start from as we try to talk about these curricular or other sorts of changes that we're introducing in the college. Okay. Some reason why these years can be particularly impactful for students in terms of wellness development. Opportunity. These are 4 years where students have access to all these great resources on campus. The timing. We know that the kind of conventional undergraduate years, 18 to 23, are really impactful for people in forming lifelong habits and attitudes that impact wellness and well-being. the relationships to substances, nutrition, exercise, healthy relationships, things like that. So this is a really a good time to try to get them to look at some of these parts of their life and work on them. We also know, of course, that wellness is closely tied to their academic success. We know that when students are in academic trouble, that in many cases, the root cause of that is a mental health issue. And of course, that goes beyond their college years to really their entire career. My goals, sort of bringing all of this together, is that I want students to develop their mindfulness, creativity, and resilience so that they can flourish and help others flourish. So how do we do this? Three main ways that I'm thinking about. So courses, of course, as a College of Arts and Letters, classes are really the heart of what we do. We already have an IAH course that was developed by Rob Rosnowski, who Stephen talked about a few minutes ago. Rob is really interested in mental health in the arts and has created this IAH course, which he's running this semester. I'm going to be teaching a special topics course next year that is trying to take sort of knowledge, research from positive psychology, from acceptance and commitment theory, therapy, from design thinking, and gives students in the arts and humanities some ways to take that knowledge and really apply it to their intellectual and creative lives. I also know we've got a lot of faculty in Cal who are really interested in these things and are finding ways to integrate mindfulness practices into their courses. We have a mindfulness teaching group in the college right now, and I'm hoping there's going to be, lots more interest in that as we go along. I'd mentioned earlier co-curricular programming that I'm creating myself and also collaborating with other people from around the college and around the university. I'm also really interested in getting the helping professions on the radar for our arts and letters students, so they can consider the helping professions, particularly mental health, as a place that you can go with an arts and letters degree. I can tell you that, as a therapist, I probably do more writing now than I did as a writer and a writing teacher. There's so much writing in mental health, and interesting writing and difficult writing. So not that we want all our English majors to become social workers, but I think for some of them it could be a great fit and a great career trajectory. So we're trying to put that before them and give them opportunities for internships and things like that. I'll wrap up with this. Why I think wellness and the arts and letters are so intricately connected, because it's occurred to me as I've started to do this job and try to articulate some of this, that what we do in the arts and the humanities are powerful means of cultivating wellness. So in the arts, whether we're talking about creating the arts or experiencing the arts, whether it's artist or audience, is a great model for what mindfulness feels like. It's a great way to practice it, to cultivate it. Our experience with art, whether creating it or consuming it. The humanities, of course, is really based in finding the values that we want to live our lives by, critiquing the values that we're given, refining them, revising them, learning to articulate them. And the arts and humanities together give us, maybe more so than anything else that we've created as humankind, gives us a way to engage with these insoluble aspects of human existence: disappointment, regret, loss, illness, mortality. All of this is really at the heart of achieving wellness and well-being. So I'm really interested in trying to particularly, work with all of these world-class scholars and artists that we have in the College of Arts and Letters to try to bring out more of this aspect of what we do. And by the way, that also, I think, is another thing we can put on the table for students as to why you might want to major in an arts and letters field, is that, it's a way to explore wellness and well-being. Okay. hopefully I haven't gone too far over my time. If there's any time left, I'd be happy to take any questions. And thank you for listening, and hope this was useful or at least interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, we've had a few questions come in. So the first question that's been asked is, how are you aligning the Director of Student Wellness role in Cal with Directors of Health Promotion, Student Health Services, and Counseling and Psychiatric Services who are setting campus strategic plans for student health and wellness?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would probably, the most I can answer that is that my role is very unprecedented in that it aspires to be half clinical and half academic. So there has been a fair amount of administrative labor that has gone into figuring out how they're going to configure me, what my job title is going to be, and ways that is going to align with some of those other roles that are strictly in student affairs. I'd say as of now, that's all just sort of being worked out. I'm really interested in working with health promotions. So health promotions is sort of the umbrella under which CAPS sits. They do things like the exercise program, nutrition program, sexual health, alcohol and other drug programs, recovery programs. So that's all stuff that I'm really interested in helping our students connect to. So hopefully that didn't sound evasive. The answer is it's all sort of being worked out because what I am doing is sort of unprecedented.
I think the second question sort of aligns that as well. Sort of how are these initiatives within Cal being coordinated with campus partners, working across departments? Essentially, how is your work coordinating with larger umbrella work that we're doing across campus to create a healthier community for students, faculty, and staff?
Well, when I conceived of this job, I really thought it was important that I was actually a staff member in CAPS, that I was a staff therapist there, so that I would, have the oversight and supervision that you have as a staff therapist, but I'd also have the access to CAPS and be able to help our students have more direct access to CAPS. So I am trying, like when I have planned some of the co-curricular programming for Cal students, I've, for example, collaborated with one of the social workers who's a colleague in CAPS who has some particular expertise that I thought would be helpful for our students. So I am really, mindful of trying to bring the student affairs and academic fields together. I am on some committees that are more university-wide. There's something called the JED committee, which is looking at mental health issues for the entire university. I'm on a committee that is sort of promoting Healthy Minds, which is that survey that Michigan State students take every year. So, I'm plugged in at that level a little bit, although my focus really is exclusively on Cal undergraduate students. That's my that's my mandate. So,
and I think I'm going to combine two questions here. Which one is it? How's this pilot year been? Are you? How is your success being engaged? Have you been getting the sort of level of engagement you expected with students? And then, furthermore, are faculty part of your purview as well?
Yeah, it's been very positive. So, it took me. The fall semester, I basically spent getting officially plugged into CAPS. So I had done my internship there, but then that finished, I graduated and I was done with it. So to get me sort of reassigned there as a full-time clinician, you know, there were a number of hoops I had to go through. So it was basically the beginning of this semester when I could start seeing students clinically. That's gone well. What we found to begin is that most of the referrals are coming from faculty and advisors, which is frankly because those are people who know me. So they're sending students to me, and then I'm able to do screenings with students and then connect them with individual counseling, with me if I'm a good fit, with one of the other counselors if they're a better fit. And so that's gone very well. We have the system in place now, and so I'm confident when we come back in the fall that you know, it's going to be really work well for students to have another way to get connected to CAPS via me. The response from faculty has been awesome. A lot of encouragement. I've created something I call an advisory community, which is sort of like a low stakes advisory board, where I've basically invited all faculty who have an interest in this to be part of it. And this is just a group of people that I can turn to for guidance, for their expertise, hopefully down the road to collaborate on workshops and things like that. So it's been awesome. I mean, obviously with what's happened with COVID, there's you know, a renewed interest and attention on student wellness and well-being. So yeah, the support has been really heartening.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this pilot program with us and for coming to speak with us tonight. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Sandhya Shanker, and she's an academic specialist from the Center for Learning, Teaching, Advancement, and the director of the MSU Community Language School. She teaches the French for Adults program and has taught the French for Kids program and the French for Teens summer camp for a number of years. Tonight's talk is, it's never too late to learn a language. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen, for the wonderful introduction, and hello, everybody. So this is going to be somewhat of an interactive session, as you can guess, because we are in the business of teaching languages. And I'm going to start by sharing my screen with you, walk you through a couple of pointers on why it's never too late to learn a language. And then we have two wonderful instructors from our language school present here who will be walking you through two short language lessons like they are done in our adult classes. So I hope you will enjoy the session. So let me go ahead and share the screen. Is everybody able to see it? Stephen, is this working? Perfect. Hello again, and my name is Sandhya Shanker, and I am joined by my colleagues Delia Castaneda and Carmen De Lorenzo, and I'm going to be talking about it is never too late to learn a language. And I'm going to walk you through some reasons why. But first, I'm going to play this video for you, and if you have a Post-it, a sticky note, or a pen and paper somewhere next to you, or just in your mind, if you can note down some of the languages that you can recognize, and then put those in the chat, I'll be curious to see how many you could guess. So here it is.
Une fois, ma grand-tante m'a dit que chaque langue qu'on parle est comme une autre personnalité. Il y a des langues qui te donnent de la confiance, il y a des autres qui te font timide. Zijn talen die je verdrietig maken en talen die je blij maken. Η θεία μου μιλούσε 5 γλώσσες. Θυμάμαι καλά τα λόγια της. Τα θυμάμαι επειδή σε εκείνη τη στιγμή αποφάσισα να мάθω όλες τις γλώσσες του κόσμου. Я хотел, чтобы иностранные языки стали важной частью моей жизни. Per me, le lingue sono state una uscita. Con le lingue potevo sognare. Ich konnte meine Weltanschauung herausfordern und mehr über die Welt lernen. Maar daar was ook een ding wat vir my baie moeilik was om te verstaan. Hoekom het so min mense verskillende tale wil leer? Kon dit net wees dat hulle nie geweet het nie hoe nuttig dit is om 'n nuwe taal te leer? Én most 15 nyelvet tanultam, és 5 különböző országban éltem, és már nem vagyok biztos benne, ha a nagynéném egészen igaza van. A személyiséget nem változik, amikor beszélsz egy más nyelven. It's more like you're just putting on a different pair of glasses through which to see the world each time. לדבר שפות יכול רק לעזור לך בחיים. השפות פתוחות דלתות שלעולם לא ידעת שהן שם. בגלל השפות אתה יכול לפגוש אנשים, ולא פשוט לעבור אותם. Los idiomas te dan una oportunidad de verte con los ojos de una otra persona. Y en una época cuando se está hablando menos entre diversas culturas, sin duda eso es algo que nos hace falta en el mundo de hoy.
All right. So if you can put it down on the chat, just everything, not in the order that you heard, but just whatever languages you were able to recognize. I'll give you a few seconds. Please go to the chat, and if you can select panelists and attendees and then put your answers down. That way we can all see what you have. Do I have, it's just Q&A, right? Or there's chat, okay. Yeah. Any others? Wow, yeah. I'm seeing many right answers here. Right, yeah, the flags were a giveaway. Anything else? Anyone else? Yeah. Well, most of you seem to have recognized the English, German, Spanish, Italian, Russian, Hebrew, of course, French. Yes, Finnish was there. Great. So just for time's sake, I'm going to, yep, Hebrew. Looks like there were a couple that were not mentioned on this chat, Afrikaans and Castilian Spanish. I mean, if you said Spanish, that Castilian Spanish, and Dutch, that was there too, and Greek was there as well, and Hungarian. So those were some of the things that were not mentioned, but that's the video just to give you a sampler. Another exercise here. So you have these greetings written in so many languages. Take a couple seconds to try to figure out which is which language. And some of these are very self-evident. You don't need to put it on the chat if you don't want to. You can just kind of think it over and see how many you can guess. Okay, another couple seconds, and then I show you the answers. All right. So here are the answers, and great job if you were able to guess every one of these or almost all of these. Yeah. And I wonder if you, so if you can put on the chat how many languages from the ones that we've seen and also any others that we have not seen so far, are you able to speak? I just want to know how many and which ones. If you can put that on the chat, that will be great. The languages that you are able to speak. Great. French and German. Sort of is fine. It works for us. Anyone else? Okay, just give you a couple more seconds to put your responses if you want to. All right. Well, it's great to see some of these languages here. Hi, Dr. Lovick. Of course, I should have guessed. All right. Wonderful. So moving along, here are, if you're thinking of how many languages are there in the world, there are a ton of them. Just to give you some numbers, we have about 6,500 to 7,000 languages roughly that are spoken in the world. And these are some of the broken, percentages of people that speak some of these languages. Whoops, I think I jumped way ahead. So you see Chinese Mandarin, 14%, and then we come down to Spanish, English, Hindi, Arabic, Portuguese, Bengali, Russian, Japanese, and Punjabi. So we have all of these, and of course, so many more. Here's a map that shows you the most spoken languages in the world. And again, the ones you saw in the previous list are, they are the ones that are featured on this map. And languages are used professionally throughout the world by people. So where are some of these areas where they are used? And here are all the areas that you can see where languages are used. Language teacher, translating, tour guide, diplomatic, international relations, engineers, researchers, military, doctor and other medical professionals, and many more, entertainment, product localizations, and so many more. Now, reasons as to why we need to learn a language and why it's never too late is it does help you understand a new culture. Some people learn it because they want to preserve a family heritage. It makes it easier to travel when you know the language. Great for the job market for young professionals. Helps you understand your own culture better. And many students have told me that it improves their knowledge of English. Being bilingual improves planning and problem solving. So you get some of the cognitive abilities, performance improvement in other academic areas, and keeps your mind sharp for longer. So that's the big takeaway. So that's why it's never too late to learn a language. And increases multitasking ability. Wow, okay. So I wanna stop here and, where can you learn a language? So at home, definitely, if you have other family members that know. By traveling, some of you have picked up languages like that. In the community, at a friend or relative's house or with their family. At work, if you've interacted with other colleagues that speak other languages. By living abroad, if you've spent some time abroad, you've picked up another language. On the internet, of course, there are language softwares and things like Babbel, Duolingo, and some of you might have tried those apps. The one other place that you can learn a language is at our community language school. And we offer programming in several different languages for preschoolers, for elementary, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and adults. And we do weekly classes during the semesters, and of course, summer camps that were happening before COVID, and culture events that are still happening, but virtually. We also partner with local schools and run enrichment programs. And these are a partial list of all of the languages that we offer. And here's our website. So if you are interested to sign up to either be a student and learn a language or teach for us, that would be great too. Please visit this website and you'll get all the details about our programming. I want to stop now and share a short video about our language school with you that I hope you will enjoy. So give me a moment while I switch my screen sharing.
What if you had the chance to travel the world right from your own community, exploring new cultures, enriching yourself in new languages, opening your mind at an early age or even later in life to all that the world has to offer? That is what one Michigan State University program, the Community Language School, has to offer.
CLS does a lot of outreach activities, and we try to connect with the larger community. So we run language programs during the semester, the fall and the spring, and these are offered to everyone from preschoolers to kids to teens and to adults.
While CLS has been operating in person since 2008, They have now begun to implement virtual classes and events.
At the Community Language School, our educators take advantage of the deep knowledge that our many colleagues at Michigan State University provide, from our world-class second language studies program to our renowned College of Education.
In addition to offering classes in a wide array of languages for any and all ages, CLS also hosts events more targeted towards cultural awareness.
I think, one of our missions really is to create global citizens. And this has become a great need in recent times as the world expands and people are finding even a greater need to interact with each other. So we want to give everybody the ability to be able to communicate. This ensures that, we all have an open mind to people of other cultures. We are accepting of diversity. We have an open attitude to somebody coming from another culture. And I think it really opens up our mind to the richness that surrounds our world and not to think that, this is the only world that we live in.
As an introduction for children to other worlds of culture and appreciation, or as a way for busy adults to fine-tune their language learning skills, the Community Language School is the place to look.
All right, so that was a little video. I now have the pleasure of introducing to you two of the instructors that were featured on this video. And our first instructor is Delia Castaneda, who teaches our Spanish adult program. And she will walk you through a quick Spanish lesson. And my next instructor, Carmen De Lorenzo, who's also here, is going to do a sample Italian lesson for you. And they are our best teachers in our language school. So I'm pretty sure you're going to have fun. So I will now have Delia start her lesson. Delia, you want to go ahead?
Okay, hola. Sandhya said that I am very good teacher, but what I am doing is have fun with my students and try to learn from them and they learn from me Spanish. So today we are going to do not a complete class. It's only few minutes, so don't worry, it will be very short. And most of you, maybe you know all the things that I'm going to share here. So our first class for people that doesn't know anything about Spanish is Saludos. So maybe you watch movies and as you say Spanish, I am so happy when I saw Sandhya's slide that it is the second language most speaking, and that's very good because I speak Spanish. So, and a little bit English. So I am fine because it's the second language spoken in the world. So first is Saludos. So this is the most common, and I don't need to say to you what that means. Hola. So you see in any place saying hola, and sometimes we say hola, even we don't know what that means. But here I am completely sure that you know hola. What is the meaning of hola? And then depending of the day, we have buenos días, buenos días, buenas tardes, and buenas noches. So buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. So now you know hola, and I'm not going to ask you to repeat. And don't worry, at the end, I'm not going to ask what greetings you learn. So I am only going to say it. So don't worry, but pay attention. So hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. And then I do my students repeat it, but I am not going to do that with you. Then we have adios. Another greeting that you know very well, adios, adios. Now, this is a cultural thing. You see that I move my hands a lot. Latin American people, we use our hands a lot. And also cultural thing, when we greet each other, we put our cheek together. Now for COVID, no. But still I use my hands to speak because I am Latin American, I'm from Guatemala, so muy bien. So we have again, hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, adios. And another common is nos vemos, hasta luego, hasta la vista. For the movies, you know what is the ending of that sentence. So all that are to express how we want to say to greet or to say goodbyes. And then the common question. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Hola, ¿cómo estás? So for a complete answer, I can say yo estoy. Oh, so now is in English will be hola, hi, how are you? So in a complete answer, I say yo estoy. Yo estoy. Yo estoy. Muy bien, muy bien. But if we answer just muy bien, that's okay. But the complete answer is yo estoy muy bien. Or yo estoy mal. So then I ask my students, ¿cómo estás? And somebody say, muy bien, or mal. And then, ¿cómo estás? Feliz. ¿Cómo estás? Feliz. Muy bien. So I can ask again one by one. So I can ask, Sandhya, ¿cómo estás? Stephen.
Feliz.
Muy
Can
bien.
I answer?
You answer. Muy bien, muy bien, muy bien, muy bien. So I asked the one that I have in my screen. So Stephen, ¿cómo estás?
Mal.
Mal. Mal. So I see mal. Oh, mal. Okay, muy bien. So Sandhya está muy bien. Stephen está mal. Yo estoy feliz. And one more. ¿Cómo estás? Triste. ¿Cómo estás? Triste. Muy bien. So as you see, it is ¿cómo estás? And now you can ask each other ¿cómo estás? ¿Sí? Okay, muy bien. So let's review what we learned in these 2 minutes. ¿Cómo estás? Yo estoy triste. ¿Cómo estás? Oh, I'm sorry. ¿Cómo estás? Yo estoy feliz. ¿Cómo estás? Yo estoy mal. ¿Cómo estás? Muy bien. Muy bien. And then, what are our greetings that we learned today? Hola. Buenos días. Buenas tardes. Buenas noches. Farewells. Adiós. Nos vemos. Hasta luego. Hasta la vista. Now, if you want to say goodbye to me, which one are you going to say? Adiós. Nos vemos. Hasta luego. O hasta la vista. Just like that. Hasta la vista. Okay. Muy bien. So in few minutes, I try to teach you the greetings and farewells. But this is only a few minutes. And now, if you have any question or want to ask maybe at the end to Sandhya. And now, Carmen de Lorenzo is going to teach you more. Gracias.
Then can we have just a minute? If it's okay.
Why don't we go to the next and then we'll come back to the questions.
Okay.
Okay. Buonasera. I'm going to share my screen. This way you can see. So I'm going to give you also a short demonstration. Let me see if it works. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So, buonasera, come state? I hope you are all well. My name is Carmen De Lorenzo, and this is how I usually start my first night with my Italian for Adults class at CELTA. So, first of all, I'm going to show you a picture in Italy where there are a lot of people talking, clearly before COVID. So these people are in front of a church, una chiesa, and we see a lot of people talking. Ciao, buongiorno signora, buongiorno signor Cervi, arrivederci. Ciao Gianni, come stai? Ciao Chiara, buongiorno signor Menchi. Ciao Michele, come va? So there are a lot of people talking and greeting each other. They are very happy. So you see a lot of different greetings. Buongiorno, arrivederci, ciao. And probably you know some other greetings. So what other greetings do you know? When do we use them? So maybe some people, they know salve, which is a different greeting. Maybe some people know arrivederla, which is a different greeting, right? Maybe some people know buonanotte. So when I brainstorm this with my students, I write here all the words that they come up to their mind. Okay, so it can be buongiorno, it can be ciao, it can be arrivederci, it can be arrivederla. And why don't we try to listen these greetings from some songs and see what you can catch? I'm gonna do a little test, okay? Let's see. Are you ready for this test? Let's start with Luciano Pavarotti, and I'm gonna give you have to listen to a few of these, and then you have to tell me which one of these greetings do you hear.
Buongiorno a questo giorno che si sveglia oggi con me. Buongiorno al latte e al caffè. Buongiorno a chi non c'è. Nel mio amore, buongiorno.
Okay, can you catch anything? Buongiorno, right? Luciano Pavarotti was saying buongiorno to everything, even to the latte caffè. Right? Now let's listen to Fred Buscaglione. Okay, so which one did you hear in here? Was that buonasera or buonanotte? Buonasera, right. Now let's go to Domenico Modugno, another classic.
Mille violini suonati dal vento, tutti i colori dell'arcobaleno vanno a fermare una pioggia d'argento, ma piove sul nostro amore. Ciao, ciao, bambina, un bacio ancora e poi per sempre.
Okay, did you hear arrivederci, ciao, buongiorno, buonanotte, buonasera? Ciao, ciao, bambina, ciao. Right?
Carmen, I think we are kind of running out of time.
Yes, yes.
So
yes, so this is an example of how I make the students listen, thank you, Sandhya, to real life situation for a song, okay? And then in our classes, we start repeating, kind of like Delia did in Spanish, all the words that we heard, and we start, you know, repeating them, and with a lot of graphics and a lot of colorful things, I guide them to recognize when we use them. So this is just a little taste. Thank you for listening to me and to my colleague. And if you have any question, please write them down in our chat. Thank you. Grazie.
thank you so much. Gracias, Delia, and gracias, Carmen, for those 2 lessons. And if we have any questions, we can answer them on the chat if you want, Stephen. We can stick around for a little bit.
Yeah, well, thank you first. Thank you, Sandhya, Carmen. Sure, I'm missing, sorry. Really, and Delia, it's a pleasure. And frankly, Carmen, you brought back a lot of memories from childhood with the music. That's another story. But thank you very much. We do have a time for a question, and one came in, which is, sorry, I lost the question. Have you ran any of you actually? So have you run into any challenges during COVID having to teach remotely, and have you overcome language teaching during this time?
Yes, and it was a big challenge going online, but we managed to navigate through. We received a lot of training. MSU has been great in supporting our transition to teaching classes virtually. And we have such wonderful instructors like Carmen and Delia who quickly adapted it. So we pivoted, we adapted, and we transitioned so well. And in fact, we got a lot more responses after we moved online. So it looks like a lot of people really wanted to do this remotely. So we are happy to continue this virtually. But yes, to answer your question, it was challenging, but we did meet the challenge, and thanks to the support of our wonderful teachers.
Thank you so much to the 3 of you, and for and it's been captivating. We've seen, I know in our own home, we've seen the advertisements come and sort of scrambling. Can we get our kids involved? So thank you so much for demonstrating and showing.
Thank you so much.
And so now we're going to move on to our third presentation, which is another triple-barreled presentation. And tonight I have the pleasure to introduce the panel. I'm going to start with the panel, which is Evolving Pathways to Social Justice in the Arts and Humanities, Creativity in the Academic Class, with Julian Chambliss, Nancy DeJoy, and Natalie Phillips. Julie Chambliss is a professor of English and the Val Berryman Curator of History at the MSU Museum. In addition, he's the co-director of the Department of English, Digital Humanities, and Literary Cognition Lab, and a core participant in the MSU College of Arts and Letters Consortium for Critical Diversity in a Digital Age Research. I'm going to pick one of his many writings just because it's a favorite just topic that caught my eye. Assembling the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Essays on Social, Cultural, and Geopolitical Domain. I'm sorry, it's just it's just fanboy coming out. Nancy DeJoy is an associate professor in the Department of Writing, Rhetoric, and American Cultures, and poet in residence for the Capital City Film Festival. She is also on the MSU Sexual Assault Examiners Advisory Board, and she facilitates public exhibits of work by survivors of sexual violence and with the Firecracker Foundation. And among her articles, she's working with literacy education for diverse populations, and has published poetry in a few print venues, but concentrates mostly on the working for inclusion of poetry in more public art spheres and movements. So to that end, her work appears in museums, galleries, and other public spaces. Natalie Phillips is an associate professor of English, affiliated faculty in cognitive science program, and founder and co-director of Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab. And she specializes in 18th century literature, the history of the mind, cognitive approaches to fiction and disability studies. And her first book, Distraction, Problems of Attention in the 18th Century Literature, traces how Enlightenment ideas about the unfocused mind reshaped literary form. I think my mind today would be good in the 18th century. So I would just like to hand this over to you to give you the most time to speak, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, but Natalie's going to start up.
All right. Thank you all so much for having us. So yes, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. So our talk is discussing a grant that all three of us have been working on together, and we're delighted to have received from the Mellon Foundation. Creativity in the time of COVID. It should be art as a tool for combating inequity and social justice. So I, as Stephen kindly said, I'm a professor in English, but I also do work in cognitive science and neuroscience, which means that by day I teach Jane Austen, and then by night, basically, I put students in brain scanners to see how our brains respond to reading literature and respond to engaging with art. So I run an interdisciplinary lab with Julian, co-run, called, yes, the tongue-twistingly Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab, the DHLC, which is a student-run interdisciplinary space for engaging with all kinds of interdisciplinary research of this kind. If any of you have heard of this work, you will have heard about it on NPR, BBC, and etc. It doesn't matter for today at all. And the other thing that's important to say is that I'm also a professor with a disability. And so I'm working on a disability memoir, but this means that I'm presenting to you as someone with a neurological disorder that can cause episodic muscle spasms in my legs or in my diaphragm, or it can take me to the ground sometimes. And so I wanted to warn people that that's possible. Obviously, I'm fine. So please don't call 911. Obviously, that would be very foolish over Zoom. But I just wanted to let you know, and I hope that you take these opportunities of whatever sort of disruptions or not that my neurological disorder may present as an opportunity to sort of revel in the playfulness of having traditional academic performance disrupted. And I think of it as a sort of intervention and a form of performance art. So again, we're going to be talking about this Mellon grant. I'll just be talking about its origin story. So the inspiration for this project came from a serendipitous accident when classes went online a year ago, March 2020. And we can think of it as curricular change inspired by COVID, caused by COVID. It happened. And considering we were all sheltering in place and using Zoom, I adjusted my final class assignments. Both Nancy and I did. And I encouraged students to start journaling in particular as a way to process their experience with quarantine. And I expected a lot of things. I expected binge watching of TV. I expected to see students going nocturnal. I expected them to be facing serious emotional, financial, and all sorts of different kinds of struggles. What I did not expect is what they did. So when they hit some of the toughest moments described in their journals, when they were willing to share these moments with me and in the class, students suddenly and consistently turned to art. and to diverse practices, creative practices of all kinds that surprised me and continued to expand even what I'd been thinking of in terms of art. So, for example, one student named Jordan, working as a first responder on the Michigan State University janitorial staff to sort of handle COVID, found an antidote to the cold climate of disinfectant and deserted classrooms in bright colored painting. And as she put it, Julian, can you go to the next slide? As she put it, she said, interacting with people during these trying times takes not only bravery from us as first responders, but from those we are interacting with on a day-to-day basis. The stress that everyone is experiencing needs to be dealt with in a healthy way, and artwork has been that outlet for me. So a second student, and this is not, there's no image of this one, and cancer survivor named Kat, and they've all, by the way, just so you know, they've all given me permission to talk about their work. She created protest art to express and combat the social injustices of COVID-19 for Black Lives Matter as part of the community of the immunocompromised. And so she created a poster that is really powerful. It says silence is violent. And so another student, we do another slide, burned a guitar, burned his guitar, and then rebuilt it so that he could play his favorite death metal melody. And you know, this was a moment where I was like, wow, I don't know how to respond to this. And it just went on and on. There was gardening, there was painting rocks, there were painting murals, they were knitting, and I mean, it just kept going. TikTok videos, remixes of music, and so we started to wonder, you know, together, right? If this is what's happening in a classroom of 25, you know, what's going on both nationally and internationally, and what are these stories, and can we tell them? What's really the student that this grant takes inspiration from, though, is named Raisa Morrison, and she's on the next slide. She turned to poetry and photography to try to create a meaningful graduation experience when this defining moment in her life went virtual. And so you can see, like many others, Raisa used her journal, oh hello, these are the diaphragm spasms, to express the personal impact of the blatant injustices around her. And she wrote, quote, "I feel like this coronavirus or COVID-19 or whatever they're calling it at this time is revealing the inequalities in our world, country, and communities." She wrote, "Communities of color, and specifically the Black community, is being hit at devastating amounts, so much now that it's an unsaid risk factor for the disease." And soon after writing this, she wrote a poem, her first poem that she'd ever written as an English major. And this is the poem that we took inspiration from, because it ended with an injunction to us. And so this is the next slide. It read, "Tell me about them all. Collect their stories for me and sprinkle them in my coffee so I can stay awake during the nightly news. Turn off the timer, turn off the television, turn on the truth. Tell me a story." So from this came our desire to create a grant that would begin to ask this question: if this is happening with these students, what's going on nationally, internationally? What are these stories? How can we tell them? And because this art is being created during the pandemic, in COVID, a pandemic that's highlighting so many racial and social inequities and lived experiences of discrimination and difficulty and challenge, from the power of Black Lives Matter to the terrifying anti-Asian violence we've just seen in Atlanta, we wondered, can this art be seen as responding to that injustice? And possibly, or more powerfully, can it ever be seen as a tool for actually combating and pushing back on that kind of inequity and injustice? So I'll just tell you just a tiny bit about the work we're doing. We're beginning, first we're working to collect these creative artifacts, this pandemic art, through a crowdsourced survey and a call for art. Next, we'll be crafting inclusive physical and virtual exhibitions in collaboration with our multidisciplinary team. And Nancy will be talking about this, but there's with advocates focused on spreading and curating all of this, the focus on racial diversity, LGBTQ, immigrant and refugee populations, medical populations, individuals with disabilities, and chronic health issues, and so many more. So there's going to be a complex process of selection, and then we're going to put on an exhibit. And the thing that I'm working on as part of this exhibit, leading as part of this exhibit process, has to do with accessibility. So as a member of the disability community, I've always been interested in thinking about accessibility, and I've done work with accessible art before. And I think that'll be the next slide, Julian. Oh. No, maybe not. There we go. The work that I've done in the past has been about thinking about how individuals across the disability spectrum, particularly those with visual disabilities, which I also have, can engage with art in a museum through other sensory modalities. And so in this case, this was obviously before COVID, our mantra was touch the art, was to sort of break down the barrier. And as you can see here, it's not just individuals with a visual disability, but all kinds of things with the kids who are suddenly then touching the art and engaging with it in new and different ways. So this is changing it for everyone. And we offered everything from multisensory art that could be touched to seated yoga. And I love how I've lost one of my things. But in this exhibition, I'll just say quickly, before my brain decides to go, and we'll just switch over to Nancy and let her take over. In this exhibition, we'll have everything from Braille, ASL, 3D printed objects, captioning, guide by cell, and more. And people assisting from the Tower Guard at MSU to make this work as accessible as possible, and thinking as well about access, which I think Nancy will talk about. And so using our own creativity to set a new standard for accessible art as we share these creative works that we're collecting with others in the community. And with that, I'll pass it on to Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy DeJoy. To Stephen, thank you for the great introduction. Here's a little bit about me. The only cool thing about me is that I'm the poet in residence for Capital City Film Festival, soon to be called the Poet Laureate, because we had to talk to other film festival people. So in my usual way, I'm trying to make poetry show up everywhere in the world. So we want all the film festivals to have poet laureates now. My major contribution to the grant was to collaborate with my community partners. Next slide, Julian, thanks. On the next slide, you'll see a history of some of the collaborative community work I've done on campus and off. And I will tell you, working with the facilities and planning people and the people in landscaping who are a total hoot has been quite a joy. One of the best things that came out of pushing for public art on campus, public poetry on campus. And there's just a few of the other projects that I've been involved in. I work with the Refugee Development Center, Global Institute of Lansing, and Impression 5 every year to do a nameplate identity project with 18 to 24-year-olds from the refugee population who fall between the cracks, right? They're 18, so they can't go to high school. They're too old. They're often not prepared to go to community college yet. So we do a series of things with them. States of Poetry is a project that's going to bring together the poet laureates in every state, and hopefully Michigan will have one by next year. It is in the Senate now. We're one of 2 states that doesn't have a poet laureate. Poet laureates and the NEA funded humanities councils in every state to do a sidewalk poetry project in every state and every capital. So that's one of my current projects. My major contribution to the grant, as you'll see on the next slide, has been to work with, collaborate with community partners. In this case, Capital City Film Festival, Global Institute of Lansing Refugee Development Center, Impression 5, and Reach Art Studio, to create a way for us to have a major exhibit of the art that we collect. Partner, I don't know how much you know about Capital City Film Festival, but Capital City Film Festival, last year we brought in 720 submissions from 23 countries. And we will have an online sort of short version in November this year, and then we'll go back to our regular end of March, beginning of August times. The festival sells about 8,500 tickets every year. We do bring in producers, directors, and actors from all around the world for the award-winning films. We do help with the expenses for some of them. Actually, our sponsors help with those expenses. We did have to cancel the film festival last year, as you might imagine, and this year we're using an alternative format. But this is really important because it means we're already inviting the participants who give us art into a space that's international, into an event that's international, in a way where they're already thought about and in welcoming ways. And as Natalie said, we're going to ramp up the ways we think about accessibility in relation to lots of things, including welcoming all people of all abilities and people from cultures that we may have to take into account certain practices and so on. We're super happy, we're super excited about this because the work, which will also be in digital form, which Julian will talk about, the work, it will now go back out into the world to the places it came from and other places. It won't be, it's also going to be in the Lansing Public Media Center, which is not an elite art space, and in 5 other spaces in the community that serve our refugee populations and other underrepresented populations in our own community. And we're hoping that will make people feel welcome as well. So we thought it's very important to us that the space that the exhibits are going to be in is our spaces that have for a long time responded to the needs of lots of people in our community who sometimes go unnoticed and underserved. So why do it this way, right? Why collect creative artifacts from people who are disproportionately affected by COVID at all? And then why try to make why try to elevate their voices in this way? Well, as Natalie said, the stories we tell about what's happening right now and what will continue to happen for many years, because when the pandemic is over as a restrictive limitation, its effects aren't going to be over for a very long time, and things will never be the same for some of us. We want to honor some of the major organizations in our community that emphasize inclusive social justice practices by including their workspaces as some of our exhibit forums. We want to put the work in places that are considered safe spaces by those for whom the work will resonate, and it may inspire them to make some work, which will then integrate into the exhibits. It creates a model for inclusive practice that invites people to think about art and its relationship to communities of social justice. And of course, we're pushing on this art social justice. We want to give our community partners a voice in the creation of jury processes and the selection of creative artifacts, allowing them to help create exhibits that resonate with the people and access those spaces, and perhaps inspire those people to create creative works. It affords us safe spaces to hold workshops that are familiar to community members, where they are comfortable and confident that their well-being is at the heart of things. And people who come from other communities will be familiar with the same kinds of space, some of those same kinds of spaces Many cities have refugee development centers, for example, or global institutes. And we're trying to create opportunities for collaborations that enhance accessibility for all members of the populations our communities serve. This is very, very important, because once you start thinking about accessibility in relation to populations that are disproportionately affected, you're really talking about creative placemaking, and you're really talking about what it means not to count what our friends at DisArt call compliance as the gold standard, and to reach out to community to see what accessibility really means to them. The exhibit at the major exhibit coincides with the 2023 Capital City Film Festival. And just the last thing I'll say is, I'm a museum study social justice person, right? In order to elevate the work and the stories we're trying to tell to international acclaim, we do have the film festival, but we are also going to do a light projection installation project that will turn the whole building into something else, or whatever we figure out we're going to do. We got some time to look at that and think about it. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, like the Sydney Opera House is a very famous one. And we have one in downtown Lansing on the Comerica building, which is actually going to come up in full scale, I think, in April. They piloted it partly in November. So we're gonna do that to the building, and we're using a company called Light Harvest. We're working with them. They're known for social justice, public art, and these kinds of installations. So they're a great partner for us. And if we have time, I can show you some of those, some examples of Light Harvest's work. But now maybe Julian, shall we move to you?
Okay.
Oh, well, here's some more slides, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. All righty. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. You never said next slide.
It's my bad, but I covered everything, so we're okay.
We're good. Again, I thank Stephen for his nice introduction. My name is Julian Chambliss. As he indicated, I'm the Ringo star in this group. That's a joke. I'm not actually.
No, it's not.
What?
He's a rock star.
Protest.
I have many titles. I don't know that they're really important, but in the case of this project, I am probably the technical guy a little bit. That's shocking at some level, because I always say the simplest tool is the best tool. But part of my focus as a relatively new member of the MSU community, I came in 2018, is I am a part of CEDAR, the Consortium for Critical Diversity and Digital Age Research. So I do digital stuff. I do digital stuff and I do comic stuff. So most people know the comic stuff, and I use the comic oriented picture, but I do digital things. And the legacy of that digital in terms of my work is that it often involves students and engaging with the community. I have been working since I came here on collections related to our comics community. Actually, one of my projects, Critical Fanscape, is actually a sort of student-centered project where we're looking at publications about comics. So we're trying to find out about communities of practice in terms of consuming comics, how they understand comics, how they think about them as modes of communication about questions out in the world. My goals around digital humanities are often recovery. They're emphasizing, because I'm influenced by a Black digital humanities framework, the idea of trying to recover voices and create a more equitable, more inclusive narrative through the sort of physical record. So in the context of this project, I do think about it as sort of extending some elements that I've worked on in terms of like focus on community, focus on ideology, focus on the arts. Another project that I've started since I come here is an oral history archive related to Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is also something that's very important to my practice. And I have some podcasts that are often focused on communities of color, Every Tongue's Got to Confess, and even my own sort of personal sort of research podcast, Reframing History, has been very deliberately asking people how do they define the digital in humanities and what are the implications of that towards their work. So my framework for thinking about the institutionalization of the work related to this grant is very particular to the things that Nancy and Natalie have talked about. The grant itself is rooted in an attempt to try to understand how COVID is shaping and reshaping and affecting people. So there's a survey that's going to be circulated. And from my perspective, that survey, which is a digital survey in its sort of primary form, but there will of course be modifications because you have to make these good faith modifications, try to reach multiple communities of practice. So for people who are not necessarily digitally have digital accessibility, is there a paper version? Yes. For people with different languages, is there translation available? Yes. For people who don't want to answer all the demographic information associated with a survey, will there be a version where they can just sort of submit their art? Yes. But at its core, there is a sort of survey element where people are being asked about the art, asked to sort of contextualize it. And from my perspective, as someone who's working on the technology side, there's a survey, and not just simply me, but me and graduate students and a bunch of other undergraduates and everybody. And then we have to take these submissions, and we don't know how many they will be, and we don't know all the places they will come from, but we will take those submissions and put them in an archive. And here again, this is an IRB sort of process. We will de-identify, place it in a space where we can analyze it and try to sort of identify themes, and then push it into a space where there will be a collection. But as Nancy has pointed out, as Natalie has referenced, there is going to be a physical exhibit. But the goal of the project is, of course, recovery, it's documentation. So everything that is submitted that people give to us will go into a digital archive. That archive will be a way for us to keep, at least in a digital record, the art that's been created related to COVID. This is not a simple exercise per se. There's a desire on our part to try to create the most stable version of these artifacts. As you can imagine, create a digital archive of this probable size means that we have to think about things like converting what we get to the most stable version of a digital record, creating the kind of metadata that's associated with it so we can hold on to it long term. And we want to have the ability for that digital record to be accessible, to be visible to people. So that digital space that we are creating will have the ability for the art that's in it, the images of the art that's in it, because we're not keeping things physically long term, for it to be accessible and be visible. And that's on top of, and in addition to, this very complicated physical exhibit that's going to be taking place in 2023 throughout Lansing. So the process that we're going through right now is a very real process of getting the survey out into the world, and then going through a process of sort of like taking things in, and then starting that process of evaluation, storage, and metadata, sort of like descriptions and so on and so forth, all in anticipation of this final physical exhibit, but also as we go through this process, the realization of a kind of digital afterlife for all these things created by people from all around the world. This is very much a global exercise. And as both Nancy and Natalie have spoken to, there's an attempt on our part to work with colleagues, both here at MSU and around the country, to make sure that we're sending the call, sending the survey, this sort of like the ask for sharing your experiences to as many different communities of that we can, in order to try to make sure that we're being reflective of the devastating experience represented by COVID on a global scale. Ultimately, this is a project that involves faculty, undergraduates, graduates, community members, and everyone working in tandem to try to come to terms with the complexities of COVID as really a once in a generation, hopefully, but perhaps disturbingly, perhaps not that infrequent an occurrence. And the consequences of that in terms of social justice and equity are still things that we continue to struggle with. And hopefully this project provides a way for the experiences of the everyday person expressed through art to be a part and a vital part of the conversation about understanding that I think so many people are seeking in these troubled times. So I'm gonna stop sharing now and we're back. Are we supposed to do more?
Lovely time for questions.
Julian, Julian, do you think we have time to show a projection exhibit?
Yes, I'm not muted now. Okay, yes, I think we do have a little bit of time to show that, but let me go to the first question. So first of all, thank you for the multiple ambitious project as is coming in with the panelist questions now. So this is to all of you. What has been the most fulfilling part of this work?
Oh,
that's the hard question, right?
So far, I think, we're just starting, right? We're just starting to share. We're going to begin to share the survey soon. And so actually one of the things I'm hoping to reach out to this community with is to hope that once we have our survey ready and our call for art ready, that this community might be willing, that you might be willing to share it with the people here and have them share it with their communities, right? Like this is sort of how this is going to spread. And so I think my favorite part is probably working with the students and seeing the student art and all of this. But I think it's that feeling of just starting to notice all of the ways in which we are turning to art to manage, to cope, to find joy in these times, and then to be able to reach out to different communities. This is such a huge team. And Nancy has brought in, I got to meet people from the Refugee Development Center and the Global Institute of Lansing and, and from the Lansing community that I would never have gotten a chance to meet because I can't drive, so I can't just go out to Lansing when I want to. And all of a sudden I'm meeting these people and hearing their stories and then getting to work with the students, and they're reaching out to other students and talking about their friends in Japan and what they're doing. And all of a sudden there's a whole other piece. And we had a student write an erasure poem based on, I hope it's okay to talk politics, based on Trump tweets. And it erased words of the poem in order to create a sort of a powerful, truthful narrative. And there was a lot erased. But so, the more these things the more I tell people, or the more we tell people, the more things just seem to come flooding in. Not yet through the survey, but just people just responding oh, well, what about this? And what about this? And my daughter did this, and my friend and my son, just so many stories. And it just feels so, I feel so honored and beautiful. I think we all do to just even be at the tip of this. Yeah. Nancy?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things is, I've been trying to integrate public art, social justice curriculum and pedagogy for a really, really long time. And to more or less success, right? But I think that this project has opened up a space for us to understand what it means to be in place and do creative placemaking that helps us see that the local really is in a web of national and international, as Julian put it, right? Creating ways to respond, right? Creating ways to cope and challenge social injustice. And it's been amazing how much I found out about how many social justice art movements are way more international than I thought they were. I'm going to Lisbon in September, if we can fly, to work with some people there who are doing some of this kind of work. But I feel like we've tapped into something that's gonna be able to affect pedagogy and consequently curriculum in ways that that will reposition creativity as essential and as vital. And my particular take on doing pedagogy and curriculum in relation to this for the past like 5 years or so has been about belonging, like what it means to belong, and helping people think about that in first year writing classes, and helping people who teach first year writing classes think about how we really need to begin with questions, because we can't go in and say, I'm going to help you belong, or I'm going to create a curriculum and then you will belong, right? And so I'm just super excited about the implications for pedagogy and curriculum, because of the ways we're expanding the idea of what it means to be in place and do creative placemaking. And if curriculum building would become creative placemaking, I would be the happiest soul on earth.
I think my biggest sort of motivator related to a project is that this is a project that has a lot of ability to surface the experiences of everyday people related to COVID. And one of the things that is always at the front of my mind is that the numbers around sorrow are often too big for us. After they get after they pass a certain point, they're so big that it's hard for us to process. You know, I'm a historian by training, and one of the things I remember thinking about when I was studying the 19th century is the impact of the Civil War. Well, technically we're not quite there yet, but COVID is close in terms of the number of people that is claimed. It is a number that is incomprehensible. And what does that do for so many people who have been affected? I think the turn towards art is a perfectly reasonable one, and the opportunity, even because it's a survey, so no survey is perfect, right? But even an imperfect tool that tries to reach out to people is better than the kind of numbing that I think is a understandable response. But ultimately, if we're going to learn from anything related to death, we have to grapple with how the system has failed and seek ways to make things better. So the fact is a student project as well, that the inspiration for the project is connected to students, I think it's very important. And so it makes for an important effort.
There was a question I had missed previously, which was a practical one. What's the name of the grant that this is operating under?
Oh, this is the Mellon Foundation.
It's the Mellon Foundation Just Futures grant.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This is what I'm fascinated by, and I think with all the talks we've heard tonight, our idea of one is the interactivity with communities, whether it's a student community, whether it's community groups. It's how do we engage, right? It's a back and forth, whether it's from personal wellness, whether it's language learning and communication, finding common languages or spreading languages, right? Or finding expression through art and artwork. But what's also fascinating, I guess, from this, if I'm getting too intellectual right now, forgive me, but it's this idea that we're in these human interactions that are going back and forth. And then there's a tactile quality to some of it, right? Some of it is, whether it's tactical for human communication back and forth, touching the sculptural objects you're talking about, but it's pulling back also into this digital world, right? Yeah. So it's about communication, but the preservation of communication. And so it's this weird contradiction that we're all wrestling with since we've essentially gone head first into this digital world.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any, I guess it's like, how do you reconcile? Like, how do we continue on merging the two, right? Because we've been always in one way. We're now here. And are these interactions that are helping us sort of go into the future and find the languages that we can preserve and talk? I don't know, I guess
No.
it's not much of a
Sorry.
question, but
I mean, I think Julian can probably answer that from a sort of more theoretical practice. I mean, one of the things that's come out of this project already is that listening to Julian talk about this, right? Like, I feel a lot more comfortable about the way things can go, about the possibilities, about how things can be thought about in relationship to digital worlds in ways that don't insist that we leave behind any of our commitments to social justice or equity, and that we don't have to. It's not so much moving forward, and I think that's why Julian was talking about recovery a little bit, but I'll let him talk. This I have found consoling, right?
Right.
Like,
I mean, I do think, from a theoretical standpoint, the idea that a digital space is a purely forward-looking space, that's erroneous. And if you think about it, as I do, as someone who thinks about Afrofuturism, part of the future industry is the past, right? Like, I'm really interested in this idea of the future industry and at some level recovering a Black future industry, and the reason that the future sort of works is that it colonizes the past, right? Like, this is why in any sort of social justice narrative, people do fight about the past. They fight about the past because that is a context for the present, which justifies the future. And so recovery from a digital humanities practice standpoint that's concerned with social justice looks to include those voices that are erased. It looks to recover those voices that are hidden. And as a project, the whole point is, yes, it's a survey, but we're going this extra effort to try to make sure that these voices that are lost in more traditional narratives, for a variety of reasons, and I'm mindful of, as I say, the nature of trauma and the enormity of loss. But at the same time, if we are thinking about that there are many experiences from many communities that can be captured, and we're trying to capture them, there is a real possibility that the record that we create will be a more inclusive record, one that is more compelling in terms of understanding the true nature of COVID, both as a sort of structural failure, which you can sort of like look and see, like that's highly documented, but it's also at some level, I think, a kind of cultural failure, because there's an argument to be made that we might have inadvertently developed a culture that is a little too at ease with cruelty, and what do we need to do to disrupt that? I mean, that's a legitimate question to ask.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to answer on a personal level, like totally not theoretical. And just to say that when we realized that there was no more possibility of doing accessible art, and this was before this project fully developed. But of course, it was like, it's COVID. We can't touch the art. There can't be accessible art, right? This year, there's just no more touching the art. That's like, would we go back to that? Would that be something? I mean, even with 3D, printing versions that people, without full-sightedness could engage with. It's like, well, I still feel nervous, and it felt like so much of a loss, that tactile, right? That feeling of like that digital, and but working with Julian and realizing that yes, we'll be able to exhibit, let's say 200 works, but in the digital space, it could contain, I mean, not all, but like an enormous number, and showcase that, and also just recognizing that again, this is bringing it back to the personal, but in my life, not being able to drive and not being able to sit in a chair and having certain things, there are so many things that I was missing because of the need to be there physically, because of that tactile relationship of the need to sit in a car and then have a driver and get there, you know. And now I can be here, I can be at this talk today, right? Because it is online, and I can engage with you in ways that feel multisensory, even though they're not, right? In ways that feel also more informal and more human and more real. At times, like I was just willing to go down the floor earlier and just be like, I'll take my computer with me, you know, in ways that I think would have been profoundly uncomfortable. You know, giving a formal talk up at a podium, being like, excuse me while I go down. You know, and so just to say that there's this complex intermixture of the two in that moving forward and into the spaces that lead to give feelings of freedom or connection. I don't know, for all the panelists. So.
Well, thank you. I think that's a sort of a wonderful thought to end with. I want to thank everybody, all of our speakers tonight, for a glimpse into the work that you are doing with our students, with our communities, with each other, and exploring communication and the broadening of all of our worlds and the articulation of experience, right? And the rearticulation of experience in both traditional and novel ways, and looking for how do we create a community where we can live healthfully and recover our connection with each other. So thank you very much for your time tonight, and to thank you to our audience for joining us as we talked and your questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.